Do you all remember when I recorded two prototypes ago and I said something to the effect of that I would never, under any circumstances, do another podcast recording after taking a shot of whiskey? I lied. Ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh, That does not go down smooth. All right, enough shenanigans. Let's get into it. Prototype episode 32. This game is epic, and I promise it's not just because I'm, just had a shot of whiskey. I turned on my whole lighting setup for that. I made sure the shot was good. I, made sure the microphone was center and frame and everything, dude. That had some effort put into it, and that's pretty much where the effort ends. Although I did obviously take a lovely screenshot of the forthcoming new Dracodon model that is currently in the game on pre-release, and I also prepared a little bit of a run of show here where I know precisely what I'm going to talk about, and that is important when you're going to get a little tipsy. So, really, the reason why I decided to go for a drink is it's not something I often do, but with Ascension number 6 in the bag, so to speak, in the books, in the history books, in the rearview mirror, I figured I had something to celebrate. So here we are celebrating through the medium of a podcast. And I'm going to be spending this week's podcast covering a number of topics. One of them is, of course, the latest developments of Cosmonic Brood War that have been happening on the pre-release patch that don't really facilitate much competitiveness because they're not directly linked to the competitive sort of side of the game. When the tournaments are running, they kind of eclipse a lot of other details. So that's going to be on the chopping block as far as what we're going to talk about. Another thing that I want to cover is, of course, Ascension number 6 itself, a little bit of a post-mortem about what has been going on and what went wrong with the tournament, what can we do better, but also, some of the good things, some of the interesting new things, and some of the things that we developed and discovered in the middle of the tournament running. I also want to cover the format and the personnel involved in the Ascension number 7 qualifier, which I'm now going to term the gauntlet stage, and then we'll have playoffs stage, probably renamed to champions stage or something like that. Or maybe it won't be champions, it might be like, I don't know. Counter-Strike has like legend stage or whatever, but I'll cover that a little bit more in detail when I get to the point where we're talking about that. But I obviously want to cover the format a bit more and talk about that. Obviously, we still have group stage, but maybe that should be like, I don't know, Ascension stage or so. Well, if the whole tournament is called Ascension, well, that's another thing. We'll cover all of that stuff when we get there. Some naming conventions to think about. We think about names a lot here, which is why I'm renaming everything to Zerg Ultralisk. Looking ahead to the Askosi is also going to be a subject here, something that we can cover because I have a lot of excitement about the Askosi and I'm really looking forward to being able to get them up and running online. However, there are some limitations that are not actually related to the iScript extender, but they won't be terminal for the project. It's just more things we're going to have to look at. They will probably end up being a lot easier than the iScript stuff, but time will tell, and we have to, see and make the time necessary to actually look into that. But I feel like the Askosi are really, really cool, and I want to talk about them. So I won't be talking too much about their lore, because actually there's a question from the coffee section related to that. But I will be talking about, what I'm excited about, the kinds of things I want to see them used for when it comes to like the play styles that they can access that we don't currently have a great support for. Something that they can basically carve out their own niche. And, maybe we can also talk a little bit. This podcast, it's probably going to be a little bit on the shorter side, but we'll see how much we go into. Maybe I'll even cover the grounds of which I'm thinking about for maybe like if we have a bunch of limits extended, why not? Why stop at 4 races, right, guys? Wink, wink, wink. But I don't think we'll cover that in this podcast. But maybe that's like bait for a coffee question in the future or something else that I can go into in the next episode of this show, which is, of course, going to be number 33. That's a big deal. So yeah, this game is epic, and let's talk a little bit about an epic tournament, Ascension number 6. The post-mortem here is something that I'm going to be trying to do on all of the following prototypes. I think I've been doing that anyway, but I'd like to specifically address some things that I think we can learn from, some things that, like, even if they were good things, why were they good, and what was good about them, and what can we do to maybe maximize their goodness in the future? And then going into some of the things that were a little bit on the weaker side, or some issues, hiccups, etc. We're going to be talking about that as well. So the production value of the tournament did shoot up quite a bit. We had a hype video that took a lot of time to edit, but now I have at least like a baseline for, what Ascension 7's hype video could look like, maybe will look like. We'll see if I decide to go with a different graphical style or something, or, add a bunch of shit to it. I might change up the style of the animation or like the way things go, and maybe constantly seek to like re-engineer that. Not in the sense that it's required, because the current method is pretty cool and I think it does pretty well, but maybe like for each tournament to have its own sort of flair. That might be something to think about. I also think that related to naming conventions, the Ascension label dies with Ascension 7. I think it's served us pretty well, but I'm probably going to rebrand or just change up the name of the actual premier tournament circuit, so to speak. So instead of Ascension, they'll end up being called something else. This may, I might decide to change that in the future. Every single season or something. I'm still not really 100% sure because, we're about to conclude season 1 with Ascension number 7, and who knows how many more seasons we're going to be. Like, how long are we going to be sticking around with CMBW, right? At some point, aren't we planning on making Antikythera operational and all this other stuff? Well, that's all kind of vague and nebulous and in the future, and a lot of it does depend on, for example, Veek's availability as a programmer. So, realistically speaking, this is what we know, this is what we have, so we should probably just think about this and, make a marked move towards something else in the future if we actually so desire. But for now, I think that Ascension is a cool name. It's obviously borrowed from Artosis, if you're not familiar with that. And, he's the one who popularized the title for this kind of tournament in my neck of the woods, anyway, as far as I'm aware of. But our tournament isn't really like Ascension. It has the King of the Hill groups, but then it goes into a more conventional double elimination playoffs bracket. So it's not really the same thing, right? So I just think in general, calling it something else, branding it something else, that would be pretty cool. And I think that makes sense. Ascension number 6 had a number of players, of course, that was divisible by 3 because that's how the group stage phase goes. But also, it had 12 players total, just like Ascension number 5. Unlike Ascension number 5, however, it only took 3 weeks to fully run from group stage to the final day, which was today. I'm recording this, of course, on the 18th of November. So that was our final day here. And I should turn off Radman. I was just busy slapping Biddy around with some very cheesy games that I hope people enjoy. After you see the high level of play and some things like the grand final, lower final, upper final, etc., these last couple of days on the tournaments, it's nice to remember that the game can also be played in a really silly fashion, and that's exactly how Biddy and I decided to play it. So it was cool to see some matches there. He bopped me once, I bopped him 4 times. It was kind of a fair fight, But Ascension number 6, though, looking at it, I think we got a lot of really cool value, a really cool, interesting storylines out of the fact that Hamster blazes onto the scene. He's the only newcomer to make it into playoffs, and he goes all the way to the grand final. He makes it through a murderer's row of opponents where he beats, the Shambler, he beats Nablime, and then he falters at the last hurdle when Mystery Meat bribed the refs to randomize him 4 times in a row as Protoss, which is just ridiculous. But even then, he looked pretty good. Like, he looked like he was markedly improving with every single game. Every game was closer. Every game he felt like he had a better idea. And at any point, you could tell he was kind of swerving and he was searching for a way to come back into the series. And I feel like if it had begun maybe in the 3rd match when he was only down 0-2, then it's anybody's set. But I thought, we didn't really see a grand final in the sense of it didn't go all 7 games. You know what I mean? It was the first time we did a best of 7. But other than that, it was kind of tried and true, right? Ascension 5 was the one that paved the way for this tournament's format to kind of work and showed us that the value of the double elimination bracket, even though it extends the time of the tournament, is still really cool because we get to experience, for one, it makes the individual tournaments feel more like an event. And for another, we get to experience these players in more games. And I think that's only going to be more important the higher quality, the greater caliber of players that we have. No disrespect to the players that have played in this tournament, but I would love nothing more as selfishly as a viewer of the tournament, not even as a caster, not even as the project author. I think as a viewer, what you should want to see is the highest level of play pretty much at any time. Presuming the game is actually fun to play at the highest level, of course, and exciting to watch and stuff. I think if we're going to see stuff like that, that's the kind of stuff that we need to see. And what that means is that people like Hamster and Mystery Me, who are our grand finalists, and you can't really say they weren't deserved because they went through a bunch of different players to get there, I want to see them like maybe be eliminated in group stage in like the 10th tournament we run, 3 tournaments down the line or whatever. Like I want to see them get bopped to the point where like our former grand finalists are top dogs. They can't hold a candle to whoever comes next. Like, I don't know if Hupsaya will be that kind of guy. He's obviously shown interest and he's competing in the qualifier for number 7. He came a little bit too late to actually sign up to this tournament. He was almost there. If he had discovered the project and been involved in the project like 1 or 2, maybe it's closer to like 3 or 4 days earlier, then maybe he would have been able to snag a slot. Scholar was narrowly missing out as well, although I don't think he would have been a tournament contender in the same way, but it would have been cool to see him. XD man, every time he posts Aromavirus, man, I fucking love Aromavirus, dude. Like, what a funny emoji and what a great guy. So, that's the kind of thing that I like to see. Not just the emoji, but like, these people getting interested. I was really quite taken aback that like so quickly we went from barely being able to scrap together 12 players to play in Ascension number 5 to, with Ascension number 6, having too many interested parties that we needed to start thinking about a qualifier. And now Ascension 7's qualifier right now, there is no cap to the number of players, by the way, at least not right now. Maybe I'll make the cap like 32 or something. But right now we have 12 players, by the way, who are signed up for the qualifier. And I mean, that's the number of people that it would take to run an Ascension tournament normally when you have the 4 groups. So that's kind of crazy all by itself. You know what I mean? And to me, I think it's really cool to have a gauntlet stage prospectively, right? And we get to see like, okay, Ascension 5 blazed that trail. It gave us the evidence of the format. It gave us all these games between players. Again, that's only going to be more impactful. The higher tier players, the more higher tier players we end up getting in, the better the players that we already have get. Like, if Mystery Meat and Hamster and so on can get powerful enough to face the newcomers that are going to be really high in terms of power, in terms of their actual power level. And I'm not talking about autism here. Like, that's really cool to me. I think it would be really awesome to see them get involved in that action, to see some of the higher tier players come into this space. Like, I want to see, Benno had a comment, good old Benno, Maverick spammer Benno. He had a comment at some point after he played in one of the tournaments, or maybe maybe he just watched like a tournament match or something. And he said like, wow, I want to see, Boxer and, J-Dong and, all these, like he was starting to name some of the old school, like classical RTS players, Brood War players. And he wants to see them play CMBW. And I was like, fuck it, dude. Me too, man. I want to see that too. I think it would be really cool. So, that's the kind of thing that I'm after, right? Like DeWalt knows about the project. Maybe I get him in. We actually have a bunch more Russian and Ukrainian speakers, recently joined the project, Hamster being one such player, as well as I'll do a couple other shout outs here. Apparently Sipiak and Igor, aka iSarcasm, are involved in that. And so, it's cool. It's cool to see that like we're sort of becoming multicultural around here, at least insofar as there's like interested parties jamming out, playing CMBW, competing in tournaments or signed up to qualifiers or whatever. And like just more and more people, you know what I mean? Like that's really cool to me. So, I want to see more of that. I want to see like the, inviting more and more people, like the fact that obviously we had, Scholar Nicholas signed up for the qualifier as well, representing Peru, the Peruvian Terran, not Terror, but that guy also knows about the project. You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of cool, man. It's kind of cool to see stuff like that. So I want to just push that even further. I want to get to the point where we have more and more people, more and more, high skill players involved in the project and really showing the merits of the format, because eventually we will have a banging best of 7 final. Eventually we will have like a crazy miracle double elimination run where somebody goes down to the lower bracket and they make it through like player after player that they in theory should be, defeated by or not favored against. Right. And that could have been Nablime this tournament, or that could, in some ways, I guess you wouldn't say it was Mystery Meat, but maybe if Keen had upset him and like really powered up, that could have been Keen this tournament. He could have been facing Hamster in a ZBZ grand final. And then everybody would have said Nerf Zerg instead of Nerf Toss. And so like, there's definitely some value there. I think the format is in a really strong state. Having the discrete stages of group stage versus playoff stage, whatever I end up calling playoff stage in the future, I think is really cool. And now having the gauntlet stage also, I think, is really cool. Now, the gauntlet stage is planned to just be double elimination, best of 3, maybe the qualification matches being best of 5. But the thing that I'm looking at for that is, that's okay that it doesn't prepare you specifically for the group play. I don't think that's too bad, because really what it prepares you for in some ways is the playoffs stage. And it also ensures that you play a wide breadth of different players if you get deep into the gauntlet itself. And I think that would be really cool just to confirm, basically. It's like, okay, well, you're guaranteed at least 2 sets of matches. Come to think of it, it would kind of be funny to make it triple elimination, because that means you're guaranteed 3 best of 3s before you lose. You have to lose 3 times in order to be eliminated. That's basically what that would mean. And I know that might sound like a meme. It certainly would extend the number of games. But the reason I'm thinking that is actually because you also need to win a lot more matches in order to confirm that you are actually the top 4 in the gauntlet, so to speak. And I think that could also be good for like making sure that the player count is, the players are actually tested like a gauntlet before they can properly move on, right? That could be kind of neat, I think. So, we'll see how it goes. If we get to the point where we need like a more small scale open qualifier for you to even be considered for the gauntlet, like if we need a qualifier to the qualifier because we have too many people, then that's a point where I need to re-engineer the format, really start to think about it, start looking at other examples of tournaments out there that do this kind of thing. Usually open qualifiers are super brutal, like single elimination, best of 1 or whatever. Obviously for an RTS, you wouldn't do that. You would do like best of 3 minimum. Best of 3 already feels pretty low though. Like, we haven't seen too many reverse sweeps, admittedly. So the number of times where it matters in that kind of context is kind of slim. But I think we've seen some times where like it goes 1 for 1 and then maybe 2 for 1, and then you come back from that deficit and win the next 2 games and qualify out. That would be a method that you couldn't actually handle that in that context, right? So anyway, these are just things I'm thinking about as the tournament operator, plus the developer of the project, plus the caster of the project. One of the casters. That's something else. And I guess that's another thing to point out is that this time around, Mesk was able to join me for all of the games of Ascension 6, and I think that's brilliant. But I don't think that's going to hold for the future. And I do think that we're going to start seeing a rotating cast of supporting casters. In Ascension 5, I think it was the 3rd group, we had Veek join me for casting. And then the 4th group, I was casting solo. And the first 2 groups I casted with Mesk. So that's kind of the case where it's like, okay, Mesk isn't going to be available all the time. And as much as I would love for him to be available, because I think he brings a nice set of color to the games, and he understands the project fairly well at this point in terms of like the signs of somebody's build order, the tendencies of a lot of the top players in that sense. I feel like that ends up working out pretty well for him. I don't know 100% if, like somebody like say Nablime, who's expressed interest in casting the project. And like he said that if Mesk wasn't available for any of the playoffs and he'd be happy to join. Like I think he said that before the lower final was played, or the elimination 3 game that turned into the lower final. I'll get into that in a moment. He actually, Nablime mentioned that, hey, if you need somebody to cast the grand final, Mesk isn't available, I could absolutely hop on for that. And then even Veek also was expressing some kind of interest for that. So I know that these people, plus 3Crow obviously uploads castovers to his own channel too. Like the more people that just start doing that, I think the better. If you're listening to this and you want to cast CMBW replays, I can get you set up for how to actually backdate your game client so that you have the older version of whatever thing there was. Absolutely something that can be done. It's fairly easy. At some point, I'll make a more public method for that. But the other thing that I'm thinking about with this context is I really want to see more people put out their own castover videos. I think that's a very valuable resource. So when people start making their own sets of games and, playing their, they submit it to the casual ladder or whatever, if Nablime or Veek wants to start doing castovers, and it's stuff that we haven't ourselves actually gotten to, 3Crow or myself, there's only so many videos I can release on my channel. I'm trying not to do more than 1 a day, unless I'm also doubling up on a prototype podcast release or something like that. Then I'll maybe do some, but you definitely want to be watchful of spamming out the videos, right? So if you yourself aren't interested in worrying about that, or you happen to be Just occasionally you do 1 or 2 videos here and there as a caster. I think that's super good. I think it's fine. I think it's nice to get more people's opinions out there. Funnily enough, somebody was trying to convince Falcon Paladin to cast recently. G22SDA is his username. See, I've got great recall, even with a shot of whiskey down, which probably means I should do another one, but I'm not doing that. I don't even have the bottle. However, I will take a sip. And then I'll continue talking a little bit about this whole Ascension number 6 thing. But yeah, as far as cast overs go, I think that would be great. And I think we are going to see more casters start to trickle in, purely because I don't suspect that MSK will be available for all of the matches. Even maybe go as early as Ascension number 7, you could see this, because he's starting to get down and dirty with a new Dungeons and Dragons game he's running using Roll20. So that's one of those things for me that, like, I know that's going to be a big time sink for him, and I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be available. They usually end up playing on weekends, particularly Saturdays, which happens to be our big day when we do a lot of matches and casts and stuff. So, depending on the timing, he might not be available for a lot of the tournament casts, which would be a shame, but, it could be something that, maybe he joins me when he can, and otherwise we grab one of the other guys that happens to be lying around. And all else fails, I can bring it to you solo. It's not a problem. But definitely something that I think we'll be looking forward to adding to that. And if you're worried about, by the way, the gauntlet stage, I don't think we will guarantee casts for every single match from the gauntlet stage. But if we do decide to do something like that, then maybe, it could be something where maybe I cast them all, but they don't get like publicated. Maybe they don't, they remain unlisted or something. We could do something like that. Just to sort of make sure that everybody gets a little bit of, feedback on their play or something for future. I don't know. We'll see about that one. But anyway, definitely there, we can switch gears to talking a little bit about Ascension 6's troubles. The things that I mostly noticed, or that I definitely got overloaded on the number of things I had to worry about switching between the prepared content, I would say. Like the Bitty interview is one of them, but the rest of them are just the hype transitions. And I think we're going to add more prepared content for Ascension 7, ideally. And that means that it's going to be more of a time investment before the tournament days, but also it's going to be more of a, hey, remember to do all these things during the tournament days. Now, a little bit of shedding some light for you guys. During the tournament matches, I have 3 things open on Photoshop, because that's 3. One of them is the events thing that you see on the splash screens, so to speak, the ambient screens, while we're talking about the results of a match, or while we're setting up for before the first game of a match. So that's going to be like showing the scores and the bracket so far, or the group stages or whatever. That includes like people's scores. If somebody just finished off a tournament, say like Hamster just beats the Shambler in the upper final, then we pan to that when I fill out that Hamster has made it to the grand final and defeated Shambler 3-1, and then I fill out the lower bracket as well as a separate image. But that's usually like, that's one of the Photoshop tabs that is open. The other Photoshop document that sees a lot of frequent use is obviously the match overlay itself. That's where I update the live score in the middle of the series. So if we have like somebody going up 1-0, then I change the score to 1-0 instead of 0-0. And that is something that I do very often. That gets changed like basically every match, right? Every single map that we play. And then after each series is when I change the other one that I was just talking about, where the playoffs bracket itself. And then the third PSD that I have open, the Photoshop document that I have open, is I call them the lower third notices, because they're on the lower third, funnily enough. When we have the ambient screens while we're on hold, with the wait screen basically, saying that we'll be live soon or whatever, that one I update the notices saying like which match is next, what are we doing as far as like how soon will we be back, and that sort of thing. And that whole thing actually needs to be re-engineered at some point, so that we actually have like a countdown timer that says like 10 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. And then I'll have to program that in at some point. I actually have never really messed with OBS with regards to that, but I'm sure there's like plugins or add-ons or whatever the fuck that handle those kinds of things. So that won't be too difficult once I actually look up how to do it. By the way, using DuckDuckGo or whatever to actually search what you need to do in OBS is like, that's how you learn how to do it, by the way. Like I had never done prepared assets and like play videos on stream or whatever. And it was very trivial to just look up how to do it and then test it and then say, oh yeah, it works. So very, very simple stuff. And then, the other thing too is that when we're preparing to do our hype transition, say for the first match of a series, I have to set my scene transition to cut, click on the scene that has the video after making sure beforehand using the studio mode that the right source is active. It's not like the last series is hype video, right? The hype transition is for the correct series. So I activate that using studio mode, and then I set my scene transition to cut, and I cut to it when I'm ready. And then after that, I set the scene transition to fade, and I have it on a 3-second fade. And when the video is around 8 or 9 seconds is when I start the game, if it's a live match. Or no, I just start the game in general at that point, because it's either it's a live match or it's a replay. But either way, we got to start the lobby. We get that countdown timer in the background as we're kicking into gear. And then like around the time where the countdown timer finishes is when I decide to actually fade it back into the actual live cast, which obviously needs to be updated with that match overlay that I was talking about earlier. So you can see how like sometimes I might forget the match overlay update, or sometimes I'll do the match overlay update, but maybe I like mistime the scene transition or something because it's not automatic. So trying to smooth that stuff out is probably like the best bet, making some of those things automatic without needing to like program in mouse clicks or whatever, because that was one of the suggestions that I think 3Crow had. But definitely something where it's like on this, like automate this action, cut to this video, to this scene, which I'll prepare ahead of time, right? Like by using the studio mode trick. So push this button, cut to the scene, wait 10 seconds, fade into this scene. That sort of like robotic action of it being automated always. It's probably something I can do on a Stream Deck or something, which I do own, but I tend to not enjoy using, so I didn't end up using it for this. That's definitely something that I think would be useful. And then, having that sort of thing to smooth that process out, I think it's going to be more important the more things we have, because the more things we add onto that list of assets to use, videos to play in the background, if there's some sort of like ambient thing that shows, like when I did the Biddy Bee interview that we did a video version of, and we used that actually as the break between the quarterfinal, or no, what was it? I think it might have been I think it was actually the fourth quarterfinal. Funnily enough, it was when he was going up against Hamster. So when I look at that, I think to myself, yeah, that could have been a lot. You could take that slow scroll of the name and the fact his face on either side and stuff, right? That was the picture he submitted for the tournament. So you could take that kind of thing, have it slowly pan across, and then like in the background have gameplay footage, maybe with like a slight blur filter on it, like a Gaussian blur of like very, very low strength, so it's not super eye straining, but enough to make it faded. And then on top of it all, maybe darken it so that it's, again, out of focus a bit, and have stats overlaid on top. Let's say, like, here's the player's stats versus each race. And then, we need to prepare those stats first, right? So that costs some time. It takes some time to pull that together. And that's yet another thing that you got to do. But I think that could be really cool. So I don't know. I guess these are just things that I'm thinking about for improving and upping the production value. I definitely want stuff like that, like what I just described for playoffs. I think it's probably a little bit too hard to do for group stage, at least right now. Maybe that's something that we can like further target for improvement. But, incremental improvement is still improvement. And I think we've already done a lot for this tournament if you compare it to Ascension 5. Some issues did occur with Ascension 6 that I'll go over really quickly. The Shambler, unfortunately, had a personal circumstance come up, and he was not able to attend the last day of play. In order to sort of like preemptively take care of one case, he did play games against Nablime, but obviously Nablime did not win versus Mystery Meat, so that series then kind of had to be invalidated. So at some point, we'll take a look at that set. I'll at least log the results of that set and, afford a... well, I'm actually not really sure what's going to come from that. But basically, because Shambler bowed out, like now it creates this other weird thing where basically we accelerated the schedule so that we only had the one set, right? We had the playoff set of the Elimination 3 convert into the lower final. And I think that's, that is what it is. That's whatever. But... it is unfortunate. I did want to see if Shambler could defend his crown, get back up to the grand final, take some revenge on Hamster. I did suspect that Mystery Meat would just bop him if Mystery Meat indeed did beat Nablime, which we know did happen later on. So yeah, it was really cool to see the matches that we did get to see, and I think it just would have been satisfying to see a definitive response of will Mystery Meat defeat the Shambler, or will he not? Will the Shambler somehow overcome him twice? It just seemed unlikely that was going to happen. Even if it was the grand final and you had 7 maps to do it in, I still would have backed Mystery Meat, but Shambler couldn't make it to that. And I guess it's actually kind of fortuitous in a way that Hamster defeated him in the upper final, because if the grand finalist couldn't make it, then we would have had to do some weird thing where, like whoever wins the, elimination 3 match would qualify to the lower final, and then the lower final would just become the grand final. And that would not have felt good, because then okay, well, Mr. Mead, the same outcome probably would have happened, but it was awkward, and it would have been more awkward if it was in that situation. So hopefully the Shambler is doing okay. Obviously it's a time of uproar and or just upheaval, I guess. It's definitely not something where it's super pleasant. But I think he's going to be okay from what little I have talked with him about the subject. And it's up to him if he wants to share anything further about that. But, thoughts and prayers, and the backing of the No Frauds Club. The energy is with him. And Mystery Meat even said that he was planning on, we interviewed him obviously after his victory, and he said he would share one of the season points that he gets for winning this tournament with Shambler as a sort of 50-50 split, since the Shambler wasn't able to compete for it. And that's, that's kind of cool. It's a nice gesture. So shout out to Mystery Meat for being epic. But yeah, what I look at from that is, that's stuff you can't control. I think our response to it from the tournament organizing standpoint of okay, you got to DQ the Shambler because he's not here. What does that result in? Well, we just move Elimination 3 into the lower final and proceed as planned afterwards. That's pretty much the best handling you can have of the situation. And then, yeah, we did actually have a hiccup. I'm not referring to the hash that happened in the grand final. There was a desync between the Shambler and Mystery Meat. I think it was game 3 or game 4 in their set. Initially desynced, the one that was on Nitro Valley. And that obviously led to some tilt where Mystery Meat then replayed him and beat him again. He said that he felt like he was going to win, although Shambler contests that, as you might expect Shambler to do. And I guess they had a hidden base or something, and that's why it happened. But anyway, the main thing that happened there is okay, well, this desync stuff still happens, right? And it actually almost seems a little bit more common on pre-release, but to be fair, we have been playing a lot more FFAs and stuff on pre-release, so who the fuck knows? Either way, though, I hope that we can really try to crack that code before Ascension 7 begins properly. Since if it's happening in 1v1s with no refs and no witnesses, it can happen literally under any circumstance. And technically it did occur in the grand final, but the game was already resolved by that point. So it didn't actually end up resulting in it didn't impact the match outcome, I would say. Maybe you can think that maybe the players committed to a fight sooner because that happened, but I don't know. I don't think it would have mattered. I think Mystery Meat was already about to win that match regardless. So thankfully that didn't happen, but that's kind of still not a good feeling if it happens at all, even if it didn't technically affect the match outcome. So I will say that a focus of mine going forward will be doing just that, trying to fix that particular problem. And just maybe we can track down more precise information about it. That's one of the things that the pre-release debug info update has, where it actually includes a little bit more info. And in theory, if we get replays from both players, we can absolutely try to identify that, or in theory anyway. We'll see how it goes, but I'll have to talk with DF a little bit more, since he was the one who told me about the replay thing and started to investigate that. Beyond that, though, I think, generally speaking, as we're getting into things a little bit further away from Ascension 6, that it was a good tournament. It seems like the production value was appreciated. I think it adds something to the broadcast. I think we can add a couple of more odds and ends that'll really make it feel complete. And, I don't want to really use the term professional, because it doesn't really work for a hobby type stream for a mod for a game. You know what I mean? It's a little weird to say that's professional, but I think we're bringing to it good energy, and we're gonna, it's gonna be even saying taken seriously is probably a little bit of a misnomer here, but I would say that it feels good, and it feels like it should feel for it to be a competitive tournament. And that's sort of what matters. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the recent focus on co-op content and faction wars game mode. Oh my God. I'm really actually quite excited that BiddyB decided to bounty up and request Faction Wars as a game mode. It came out pretty recently on pre-release. It doesn't yet have AI support insofar as they won't, I mean, they play the game, but they don't get requests changed up or anything like that. So they don't currently select factions. But that will be something that I can add, I think, relatively easily. That'll probably be something I add Monday. So when you're listening to this, maybe it's already done. But one of the things that I would say about the level of effort that's currently being deployed to Faction Wars is it's definitely kind of like minimum viable product right now. You know, I didn't include anything that you pick in the lobby. Instead, I have something where you pick your stuff in game. Admittedly, you don't need to select a building and then like research and upgrade, which is how I thought it might originally need to happen. Instead, I have all of this stuff handled through just pushing buttons when you select no unit, which means you can do it at the start or you can do it later on. I was thinking that maybe after like 30 seconds or a minute or something max, it would randomize your selection, but not sure about that. The other thing, too, that I haven't tested is whether or not, like, the printout message occurs in multiplayer for all players or what. I mean, it doesn't seem to happen for AI, but I wonder if that code even runs for AI to begin with. You know what I mean? So, like, that's another thing that I got to figure out. Definitely, again, very, very barely functional, but functional. The barely part doesn't really matter much as long as it actually does function. And yeah, it changes up your available tech tree. Most of the factions don't actually have that much. Like, I think the maximum number of factional units for any one of the factions is 2. You got the Aspirant for the Goliath and the Luminary for the Seraph for not the Futurist Federation, the Golden Republic. The Futurist Federation has the Phylock for the Wraith. The Upstarts have the Wendigo for the Anseal and the Southpaw for the Goliath. And the Nidus Trinity has the Cohort for the Cyprian and the Tarask for the Phalanx. And I think that's it. I don't think I'm missing anything. I know that there's still the Hecaton Coalition to do. But I think that's it as far as the Terran factions are concerned. And the Protoss and Zerg ones don't have any factional units yet at all. So definitely a glaring sort of exception. But the main reason for that is obviously it's not even just art assets. At this point, it's actually straight up, I don't have splendid amounts of iScript code left to be able to write and fit in. And I guess that kind of leads us into the other limits that we have, right? We have, I have discovered that our weapons.dat file is actually technically limited to the size of U8, which is 255, or technically 254, because one of them has to be none. And that means that we have 45 or so weapon IDs left to use. And that's not going to be enough for the Askosi. It might technically be enough for all the factional units, but I would even kind of doubt that. Remember that also there's probably some like unused entries mixed in through there. But, you know, there's still some other stuff that isn't implemented yet. You know, I'm thinking of like some of the Zerg units that haven't been implemented yet that need to be. And I guess the other thing to mention as well, as far as limits go, is that the stat.txt file, which basically contains in-game strings. So that's like when you mouse over a button to train a unit, it says like train whatever unit, or it says this unit requires that unit or whatever. That plus anything for like weapon names when you mouse over those on the status screen or whatever, as well as ability names. All of that is one file, as opposed to being separate files. And currently, it doesn't actually seem like it's super easy to split those because we would basically need to faction it out, if you will. We would need to split it up into separate files and then in code find all of the references, all of the things that make reference to like a specific thing, and, you know, replace it with the reference to that. Now, that would actually be better in some ways for organization. So we could have like abilities.tbl for like the passive and active ability names. And then stuff like that would be really useful, I think. Although technically it would still have a limit, but it would be much harder to hit the limit if you had like everything in separate files, right? So if you had abilities for the button labels, yeah, maybe that's easy to do. If you had, you know, the requirement labels and the training unit labels and stuff on one file, as well. That would be super good. So maybe there's some ways to deal with it in that context. I mean, the one downside is that it's no longer like a monolithic file, which is easy to edit. Because if I'm editing a file and I want to edit a weapon name, and then I also want to edit a description of a unit when you mouse over it to train it, and I also want to edit the requirement, then I just edit one file. But this would probably split that into at least two or maybe three, but probably just two files. And that's just one of those situations where it's like, okay, it's kind of more annoying to edit, but the trade-off is we can actually add a lot of things, right? So that's probably going to be a solution to that. For the weapons data extender, we already have an extender, but it only extends it out to the full length of the U8. I don't remember off the top of my head what the requirement for more weapons actually is, but we definitely are going to need to do that at some point, right? So that's just one of those things where we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but we're seeing that on the horizon. Definitely something to think about. And I guess the other thing, this isn't actually related specifically, but one of the things that I was thinking about is I'm looking at the what would you call it? The Frauds Club network properties, and how we have that limit in the Radmin network of 150, and right now we're at 127. I think so far I've checked that all the time, right? I feel like we probably haven't moved much since the last time I checked it, right? But at this point we are looking at 23 new people can join the server, join the Frauds Club thing, and then we're capped. So to me, I look at that and I think, well, that's not a lot of people. We're probably going to hit that in the next couple of weeks. I would say there's a chance we hit that before December even. And, that's not really that crazy of a thing to say. But Luciferius said that he might be able to set up a PvP GM or PvP GN. I can't rememif it's M or N, probably N knowing my life. And that is basically what runs the old BattleNet servers. So we would basically have our own BattleNet gateway. And I think it should work if he hosted himself. Like, I don't know if there's any extra steps that would be required to make it run for 161 for CMBW specifically or whatever. That would definitely be something that I would think about, is because then we would do that, and it's a lot easier then to create a lobby and look for games and see who's online, and like maybe we could set it up so that it defaults you to op CMBW or whatever for your chat channel. You'd see who's like just idling online and stuff like that, just like the old days, just like 1998, dude. And I think that would be really cool. I think that that would absolutely be something we should do, and then we wouldn't have any issues like that. I was also talking with him about potentially, like, we should probably look into seeing if we can automatically upload match statistics and replays and stuff. Maybe we can do something like that. That could be really cool. But we'll have to see. But that's another thing that we can take a look at. It's just related to limits. And, I was thinking about limits. What other limits are we at? Oh, yeah, the Radmin limit. That's not a conventional limit, but it's still something we should figure out. And I think that's the easiest way to do it, because we wouldn't need to bother with Radmin. We would just make sure that you have the right configuration for your BattleNet stuff. I mean, maybe we would still say, hey, you can use Radmin to like bridge connections or whatever, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about that one, but like, I would only hope that this doesn't mean that we would have to go back to port forwarding if we do it this way, because that's what Radmin is supposed to do automatically. It's supposed to skip that step for you. So that might be one thing that I just didn't even think about, but we'll have to figure that out. Maybe we could even automate something like that, where we whitelist the port 6112 through the Defender. Maybe that's going to be enough. Not sure. We could add that as like another step of Fraud Launcher in theory. So these are more things to think about. But yeah, going back to co-op and factional and like some of the limits that we have, I think that's pretty much the limits. The iScript developments have been continuing. I've been trying to get the game operational on an increasing front with different hooks and different things. So, that's just something that we got to wrangle and figure out what's going on with the iScript stuff. For the factional stuff, I think it's pretty obvious that I should probably add like a couple of units for the Hekatons and enable them so that at least one race has like something that they can do. But at the same time, it kind of feels like, is it really that significant? I'm not 100% sure that it is. Considering we still have some other units that Nablime pointed out is like the base tech trees are still not fully implemented as far as our ideas are concerned. And so, that's mostly down to art assets for many of those cases, but it's a fair point to make as far as like maybe you shouldn't try to implement factions when the tech trees technically aren't fully finished. As far as the co-op stuff, though, I've been refurbishing the Hydra missions. I'll be answering a coffee question about this later on. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this stuff in action because, I think it's just nice to have more co-op content. We've got the, I've been sort of like doing I guess you could say a lore pass on the missions, as well as obviously updating the layouts, improving the bases, resources, trying to configure the AI to be kind of good, that sort of thing. And I still have some testing to do for the Terran missions, but they are available, the 2 Terran missions that are there. And I still have to do, of course, the 2 Zerg missions and 2 Protoss missions that I've still got that I can edit. I think the second Protoss mission was never fully finished, but the first one, I believe, was. So certainly baseline functional. So I should at least do that as well as the Zerg ones, and we'll be continuing that this week. And beyond that, I'm mostly looking forward to just seeing what I can do as far as, the experience, I guess, of having co-op content, providing more stuff for people to experience the project in without it being competitively minded, but still testing your mettle as an RTS player. It's just like it's PvE, it's, co-op. So you don't have to feel, ladder anxiety of 1v1ing somebody or whatever. And it's FFA, so it's kind of unfair by default, or at least it's not like as fair in the sense of some of it is going to be down to certain RNG factors where it's like, oh, I got gangbanged and I, didn't expect that or whatever. You could have scouted it. So it's not like it's unfair in the sense that it's impossible to win. It's just like, if you lose, it's easier to write it off on like an excuse based on that. Like, oh, let's try again. Maybe we'll get luckier, or maybe we just got really unlucky that time or whatever. These are all things that you gotta think about. So anyway, that's something to think about as far as some of the co-op content that's out there. It should appeal to a different kind of player that may have been left by the wayside while they wait for us to stop running tournaments all the time. And I think that that's going to be good content out there. I went through and updated and refurbished a bunch of other stuff from scenarios and stuff that was in there. So the co-op folder is looking a lot more plump than it was before. Definitely check that out. And enjoy the offerings. Those are on pre-release right now, but they will be on release probably Monday. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it as far as that's concerned. That will continue, but we'll talk about that when I answer 3 Crows coffee question much later. Ascension number 7's qualifier is up next as far as the discussion topic. I want to talk a little bit about not just the format, but also the personnel. As mentioned before, right about now, we have 12 players signed up, and I have sorted them so far in a list of like how I perceive the bracket to be breaking out from 1st to 12th. And, some of these are approximate seedings where it's been a while since I've seen somebody. So like I might prefer somebody who's practiced more, even if maybe their skill levels are identical. Like, for example, I have iSarcasm 3rd and Newt 4th, but those could be interchangeable. It's just that I've seen iSarcasm play more. They might have the same level of skill approximately, but or maybe even Newt ends up being better after he gets some more familiarity under his belt with the project. But that's like a case where I know iSarcasm, aka Igor on the server, has been playing a lot, right? I actually have Hapsaya 1st and Veek 2nd, but maybe those two are interchangeable, and it's just down to whether or not Hapsaya plays more. I don't know. Veek doesn't have as much time, and Hapsaya seems to have a higher skill ceiling, or I guess maybe floor would be the better term here. His baseline skill seems to be higher. It's just his project knowledge is being tested. So, yeah, I don't know. I look at that and I think, well, Hapsaya is probably favored. Anyway, the main reason of putting them on like that way is also to make sure that they're on the opposite side of the bracket, because I would hate for them to have to face each other for qualification and then somebody else qualifies, but Veek doesn't, for example, or Hapsaya doesn't, stuff like that, if it's like one side of the bracket is really overloaded. But eventually the brackets merge anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Now, when we see this situation here for the rest of the players, right? So I guess I'll just go down the list. We've got Hapsaya, Veek, iSarcasm, all playing Protoss. We have Newt playing Terran, and then we go down the list to the other players. Dead Infested as Terran, Benza as Zerg, Nicholas 14XX, aka Scholar, as Terran, Luciferius as Terran, Moonhunter as Terran. Who else do we have? It Depends as Terran, Sipiak as Zerg, and Inozlix as Zerg. So, yeah, we only have 3 Protoss players in the whole qualifier right now, and everybody else is Terran except for 3 Zergs. So, we have 3 Protoss, 3 Zerg, and 6 Terrans, dude. It's a lot of TVTs that are up there. I gotta say, I am looking forward to the Moonhunter Lucy set if that ends up going on. Like, just currently I'm seeding them like that so that eighth seed fights ninth seed and so on and so forth. Yeah, I look at that and I think, oh man, it would be really funny to see that. Like, I want to see what happens there. I want to see Moonhunter, Anchor Cheese and Lucy Wraith Cheese, and who wins first. Like, it's like a collision of the cheeses. Who knows what happens there? And then whoever wins that plays against Hapsaya and probably gets bopped. Let's be real. But hey, Cheese could get him off. Cheese could get him off. You never know. Absolutely catch him off guard. But yeah, anyway, I'm looking through all this stuff and I'm thinking to myself, okay, we've got ourselves like a neat little situation here. Probably double elimination. If we end up getting 4 more signups, then we would have 16 players. And that would be the optimal situation here, is if it's divisible by 8, because that would basically mean that we don't have to have buys in the tournament where we have, Hapsaya and Newt and iSarcasm and Veek, if they are going to continue to be my top 4 seeds, and I'm going to adjust the seeding as we get closer to the actual go time for this, then they would have to wait for another set to finish. And they would basically automatically be advanced 1 step closer to qualification just by default due to their preferential seeding. And Hapsaya said, please don't give me a bye, but I don't know why you wouldn't want one. I guess he just wants to play as much as possible or whatever. But the reason why I would do that is because I would seed these players in that accordance, right? So it makes sense to me. But if we don't need to worry about this if Hapsaya or somebody else just invites 4 friends and then we just bang it out from there, So I feel like it could be cool to get more people involved. If I was feeling particularly cruel, then maybe I would just take, 4 more players from the last tournament, the bottom 4 from the playoffs, I guess, and just be like, hey guys, play in the qualifier. But that would be rude, I think. I've already agreed to offer them their invite back. It would be funny though to think like, hey, Keen, VidUB, who else? Beaver and 3Crow. You guys got to play in the quarterfinal. No. That would be a funny time. That would absolutely be like, what the fuck? I thought I got the invite back. Invite rescinded. Pray I don't alter the deal any further, Vader style. But no, that's not going to happen. But if somebody does have somebody who would be interested, feel free to at them, invite them, etc. Bully them, make them come into this fucking tournament totally cold, have no idea what's happening, and then compete. We're looking at sometime in that last week of November, which starts on the 26th, the Sunday, the 26th. That week we might be, really commencing things, because that'll have given me enough time to consider if we're going to make any changes to the map pool for the qualifier, the gauntlet stage, and whether or not we're going to be, making any additional balance changes. That'll give me this sort of like week off, and maybe we'll play some Frauder keys or whatever to try to hunt down those desyncs and stuff. But yeah, as far as the format goes and the personnel, I think the format will be double elim, could be triple elim. I could go crazy, but it's right now it seems like double elim makes sense. That will also potentially change depending on the number of signups we get between now and starting it up. But really excited about that, and that's the personnel as well. You get a little bit of a preview. Dominated by Terrans right now. Will any of them make it out? That's the question. Mystery Meat would say no because he thinks Terran is super weak. But honestly, some of the players here, I think especially Newt, I feel like Newt should be able to make it out, but we're going to have to wait and see. So, we have another topic to discuss. Ain't that right, ladies and gentlemen? And that topic is the Askosi, the 4th race for Cosmonarchy Brood War. Guys, I am really fucking excited about the Askosi. I think it's going to be super cool to get them operational, to even just to have like their tier 1 in the game to play around with. I think that's going to be really neat. I don't really know why I put them in the list, to be honest, of like the topics. I'm just excited about them, man. I think they're going to be really cool. I like the idea of the Askosi basically having the team building aspect for their worker production, their construction, right? Their worker construction. But I also really like the idea that some of their units will be able to jump to other units or whatever, or like leverage allied positioning to do things. I think in team games, that's going to be really cool, but I obviously think that's factors into neutral units and structures, factors into all sorts of things. I think we look at the fact that their mech is going to be, I wouldn't say super immobile, but like when some of their units, when they take damage, they're actually going to become totally immobilized. And it's something that you can try to focus down. I think that's really neat as like a passive, right? Like a behavior. I think their infantry being more mobile than other infantry, but also like kind of more glass cannony than other early tier units and stuff is going to be neat. And that's where we come down to the idea of like, what kinds of play styles are they going to be about? The Askosi are kind of intended to be this micro-focused in race, particularly in the early game, but where you're, good mechanics and all that are going to give you a lot of value. And I also think that, the way that they have healing by recycling corpses and other things is also going to factor into like positioning battlefields. Like even where your units die are going to be kind of important to you, as well as where you position your enemy's units, where you force your enemy to position in order to take advantage of their corpses. So like positioning is a big deal for the Askosi. That's absolutely the case. I think micro, I'm not to say that they're going to be more micro intensive than the other races or whatever, because micro is going to benefit any race, any player, at any point will get more value out of their units when they micro them. And I think that's fine. But when we look at it from the Askosi standpoint, it's almost like there's going to be a baseline expectation that you make some usage of good positioning before the fight, which can kind of be construed as like pre-micro in a way. And then, you have these ways to do outplays in the middle of the fight. But it does require some setup. So it's like strategic. High-level strategic gameplay will reward you for positioning, and then the actual behaviors of the units can be leveraged in a micro sense, and you will be able to do a lot with that. So I guess kind of a bombastic race, kind of like an exciting one where they have a lot of potential latent within them, but you do need to have like a decent amount of awareness. If you catch an Askosi player off guard or sleeping, or they're a little bit slow to react or something, then you might be able to get a lot of damage in on them. So yeah, that's absolutely going to be the case. And I don't think that they're actually going to get access to transports until, tier 2, but that sounds worse than it is, because when they make, say, two of their structures, like two biotic production structures, like essentially two stockades, for example, the equivalent of that, they'll have access to like the tier 2 production structures at that point. Basically, it's going to be like based around that. So I'm not sure if 2 is going to be the number. It might be more than that. It might be 3. But the idea is basically like they can choose to, if they build, say, like the old idea was like if they build, say, the stockade equivalent, then they'll get the captaincy equivalent, but they'll also get access to the mantle equivalent and the starport equivalent. And so maybe that'll also be what I end up doing, but having like, a 1.5 as opposed to just a straight up to 2. And that'll be what they do. So maybe they have like 2 structures in each, like the biotic branch and the mechanized branch at tier 1. And one of them is about like, producing, say, cheaper units that maybe don't have as much micro potential. And the other one is about producing these more specialist units that have more micro potential. That could be like one example of the parity. And then the mechanized ones, maybe you've got like fast moving mech units that are more about scouting. And then you might have more slow-moving mech units that have the frontline reassembly thing where they deploy on taking fatal damage, right? So that's a kind of, or not fatal, it's a heavy damage. So when they're dropped below like 40 HP or whatever, as an example. And I think that's just an example of like how you might parse that off. So you need like the basic tier 1 stockade type structure to unlock the advanced tier 1 stockade type structure, but the basic tier 1 stockade unlocks the advanced tier 1 fulcrum as well, if you want to use it from those perspectives. And then when you make you could theoretically go like, say, biotic simple production into advanced mechanized production into a tier 2 structure at that point, because you have like the pre-required steps, right? You have the prerequisites resolved. And I think that could be really neat as a concept. So it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, just a little bit of blabbing and enjoying the Askosi as an idea. And I think that's pretty much all that I have to say about them right now, because I do have to answer a question about their lore when we got up to the Shambler's coffee question, but we've got another one to start off with, so let's get started on the coffee questions. If you somehow don't already know, you can go to the coffee link below in the description to donate to project development, and I split most of those donations 50-50 with Veek. The ones I don't are when somebody requests a bounty or explicitly says this is like, I got birthday money a while ago, something like that. But generally speaking, those either get sent to the prize pool in the case of if you specifically say you want that for our competitive stuff, or you send it and we split it 50-50. And that's essentially project development funding. So check the link below. enjoy that shit. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the other side because you'll get to ask questions. That's one of the perks of being a coffee contributor. You also get to talk shit with us and generally speaking, have access to a more exclusive club if that matters to you. A club within the club, Ackmed's club. And time to hit my head over with a club. JK, it's time to answer questions instead. Myrian asks, what are the most unlikely or schizophrenic alliances that can occur in Xibalba? And I do like this question because it's almost like, what's the most absurd situation you can be in? Well, Xibalba, for those who also don't know somehow, is a project of mine that is essentially... You can kind of think of it as my own, sort of universe, my own gigantic sci-fi setting. And that is, well, it's funny. It started off a long time ago. I had something that I simply referred to as the concept. I wonder if I can find that earlier. I actually remembered that existed, that was a thing that I wrote out. It was like, I don't know. I think it was probably like hyper-autism, but I wonder if maybe I can search for it at some point. Anyway, the main thing that I like about this sort of thing, when somebody asks me questions about like the regencies in the project and stuff, which are our name for races and stuff, what's the most crazy thing that can happen? I like the most extreme stuff. I like what's the most ridiculous thing that could occur. And so like the first thing that came to my mind when I read this was the Githrovin and the Solar Throne. And that's not going to surprise anybody who knows about them. The Githrovin invented the Solar Throne, but they did so... They look back at it as like a very big blight on their record, something that where they really wish they could take back. They hate that what their creation has turned into, and their creation just thrives in the knowledge that it is constantly a thorn in the side, a mental sort of drain on the Githrovin, on its engineers, right? So that's absolutely something that would be really weird to see. I don't think that even really needs much elaboration. I do think, however, that the Solar Throne would definitely delight in fighting alongside the Githrovin because they know that it would piss them off so much, and the Githrovin would be like really biting their, proverbial sort of like biting their tongue, just like, oh my god, I can't believe we have to fucking do this. This is what we've been reduced to, having to collaborate with our own misbegotten creation, that kind of thing, like that. They would be really quite upset about that situation. So that's pretty funny. I think the Githrovin and the Makral Das would be another interesting one because the Makral Das are obviously these sorts of like slavers in some way, the Makralon specifically, as part of their union, you could say, where they have this, you could argue it's a symbiotic relationship with the Dasir, but the Dasir, as much as they have been elevated in some way by the Makralon, they are still slaves. They are still under mind control. So I think it's more parasitic than symbiotic. But either way, they have this, relationship where they're clearly not respecting the agency of another life form, which is kind of running counter to what the Githrovins are all about, I think maybe the Keltar and the Rune would be like a weird combo in terms of the sort of dynamics socially between the members of each race, where the Keltar are these honorable sort of warrior, bloodthirsty types of combatants. But, the key is honorable there. They don't really, they prefer fair fights. They prefer fights where everybody's agreed to it. And their definition of you agreeing to fight them can be you standing in their way when they're trying to expand their empire. But they give you the option, they do say, hey, you can fuck off if you don't want us to just charge on in here and absolutely wreck your shit. They say it in fancier language perhaps, but not that much fancier. Maybe more brutish language just without the expletives. Well, I haven't decided, by the way, as a sort of total aside, if I feel like making it so that some regencies say fuck. Like, should the Ansifi say fuck? I don't know. They're like the most human that we have, but what would you say to that? I don't know. Maybe they can have their own expletives, but that just comes across a little too cringy for me. So anyway, the Keltar, they don't really respect what the Rune do. The Rune just charge on in. It's sort of like dick first into a spiky wall. They don't really care about their own dead. They don't really care how many die on the way. They just want to kill everything and sort of rape and pillage stuff, right? That's sort of their MO. And I think that would very much not jive with the Keltar way of doing things. So that would be kind of an interesting one. And then I was thinking that the Nadarasatha and the Cathethrons would be a really weird one, where the Cathethrons are, well, I guess also Nadarasatha and Githrovin, since Githrovin are sun spawn, they worship the sun, and Nadarasatha fucking despise the light, so that could be a fun one. But yeah, Nadarasatha and Catethron, or Bithrantir and Catethron, both of those would be a little bit strange, considering the Bithrantir have like this time dominance, but the Cathethrons experience all of their life at once. So like, I feel like they would risk like universal implosion if a Catethron experienced all of its life at once, and then the Bithrantir made their life infinite. Like that would probably just result in total detonation of the life form or something. I don't know how the fuck that would sustain. You know what I mean? That would be really weird. But then you look at the Nadarasatha as well, and just the fact that like the way that they recycle corpses and stuff. That's another thing where it's like, does the Catethron recognize that its future, I mean, maybe it no longer counts as existing when it's dead, but its future may be in the, you know, in the ranks of the Nadarasatha as like a zombie or something. That's kind of interesting to think about. Yeah, I think also like just generally when you take like, you know, not the Omindris. I'm thinking of the Orlithray. The Orlithray and Gadamemter. You combine those two. That's another really weird one because Gadamemter absorbs everything, and the Orlithray like try to, you know, they discard what's not useful, which is kind of the opposite of Gadamemter in some ways, where it doesn't care if you're useful, if it cares if you're unique. And so like the Orlithray only care if you're useful, and they discard everything else. And so like that would be interesting to see like what do they converge upon, and like where one of them is going to try to, you know, claim this thing for themselves, and what do they decide to, you know, both, you know, not go after or whatever. What's neither useful nor unique, basically. I think that could be kind of interesting. So yeah, there you go. There's some examples anyway of what's going on there. Another really weird one would be Nadarasatha and Avot, since Avot are beings of energy. But anyway, that's I think I've explained enough about that, but an interesting question. Definitely nice to revisit Xibalba under those circumstances. The Shambler asks, a deep dive into the Askosi system of governance would be much appreciated. So I guess he doesn't really ask for anything. He asks for a deep dive into the Askosi system of governance. So governance for the Askosi, I've described it before, like definitely got inspired by the Dune books by Frank Herbert. And something that happens in some of those books later on is there's an event called the Scattering, and it's part of the Golden Path that was laid out by, you know, Atreides member, Leto II or whatever. And so like that's its own thing. But if you haven't read the books, basically a bunch of mankind disperses into the wide stretches of space, and something like that basically has happened to the Askosi, but it's not for the same reasons as what happens in the Dune books. Instead, you can think of it as they were they basically had a great civil conflict, and they burnt their homeworld in the conflict. And they did have more planets, and they had other solar systems already colonized to some degree, but a lot of them were neighboring. And so, you know, the faction of Askosi that remained in their homeworld, in their home solar system and stuff, that decided if, you know, like if I can't have it, no one can kind of thing. And they pulled the trigger on that. They are the ones who sort of remained in that system, and everything else just left as, you know, all of the other Askosi sub-factions, if you will, scattered elsewhere. And they've repopulated since then. And so I don't think you'll see any of those, at least in the CMBW verse. You'll see like a subset of the Askosi that have managed to make it to Crescilliant, because they are not native to there. They're native to a different sector. But thinking of it in those terms might help you understand sort of where they come from. And they've had this great civil conflict, and many of them have scattered to leave tyranny, to leave certainty, to leave, you know, being essentially in servitude to a grander power that, you know, a more concentrated amount of Askosi somewhere else that wasn't afraid of destroying their homeworld in order to secure their dominion. And that should kind of tell you that, like, the Askosi that wind up in Crescillian and the Askosi that scattered in general, the scattered Askosi specifically, are very averse to tyranny as a result. So one of the advantages, you could say, or I guess just the side effects of having enmeshment with the technology as they do, is for those who don't know, the Askosi are these bipedal sort of lizard type creatures, but they happen to be cyborgs. They happen to be cybernetic. They have a lot of engagement with the technology that they've achieved. And it doesn't allow for mind reading, but it does allow for instantaneous communication between Askosi using sort of like telepathy. It's like you've heard the Protoss dialogue, the way that it's voice acted is often with the reverse reverb effect and stuff. And that's sort of like the idea there is that it's supposed to be like, hey, I'm speaking to you telepathically through my mind. But really what that to me is a stand-in for is the fact that we're not sharing thoughts. We're not sharing words. We're not like speaking our thoughts to you. You're just experiencing our thoughts. You're experiencing our emotions, our experiences, whatever. Because that's sort of like what the Kala was supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be sort of like what Neuralink is promised to be by Elon Musk for humans in the here and now, or more likely in decades in the future. And I think when you look at it from those perspectives, you can kind of see the differences, right? The Askosi don't have the ability to share each other's thoughts immediately, but you could say that the speed at which they can communicate has been shortened, or I guess increased, I should say. It's like the gap is shortened because they don't need to open their mouths to communicate. They can do so through the cybernetic attachments that they have. And they're not really like, they still kind of vocalize it for the purposes of the voice acting. But they have like this sort of communication bridge. And that actually doesn't have come to think of it, the way that they like telepathically, in air quotes, communicate using the cybernetic stuff does have to be transmitted a little bit differently. The range for that is shorter. So when they're like with each other on the ground right next to each other, or like in a ready room somewhere, if they're not communicating remotely, then they don't actually need to speak. It's funny because there's probably going to be some things that I play around with from that concept of like, here's an Askosi that hasn't had to speak forever because it only communicates long range, long distance. It's a socially isolated Askosi, and as a result, it communicates entirely through the it's basically it never ends up communicating like internally. I guess it would be the inverse now that I think about it. So it's like if you communicate long range, then you have to speak because it has to be recorded and then transmitted or whatever. But if you're communicating short range, then you do so without needing to verbalize, without needing to vocalize. So that gives you a little bit more insight into how their sort of ready rooms might look like, where you could even, interestingly enough, like Askosi on Askosi violence could result in, them deciding like, hey, we should only speak through vocalization, because if we don't, then, they might intercept our thoughts, sort of thing. That's the kind of thing that you might be wary of. And maybe the Protoss could develop some way to do that, technologically speaking. Maybe Terrans could do it too. I doubt Zerg could, but, that's that kind of thing that you can play around with. Anyway, it's kind of neat. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, these are the kinds of social dynamics that you might find in Askosi. They have the ability to communicate, very, very well in terms of a technological standpoint, particularly if they're close by. So you're going to see tightly knit communities form. You're going to see, a lot of fast sort of engagements. And I guess you could call it like the distribution of information is going to be fairly robust with the Askosi. And it's like if you had your computer on tap that you could control with your brain, and instead of it being on a phone, that would increase the bandwidth that you have for information. So stuff like that happens with the Askosi. And all of this shades in the details about, what you're going to deal with when it comes to their form of governance. And also their history as a species, scattering away from their home world and their home system. It kind of tells you all you need to know about these guys, right? There's a reason why their basic worker is called the Pilgrim, for example. So they definitely need to, they have this need, they have this strong desire to do their best to avoid tyranny. Pretty much like that is one of the things that they're very sensitive towards. And that means that they definitely like the idea of democracy. And they are technologically equipped to do an actual democracy where it's not difficult to count the votes. It's not difficult to, have anything like that. So instead of doing like a representative republic or whatever, they can actually do straight up democracy. So I haven't decided if that's actually going to be their form of governance, but it seems like a likely option for them since, they'll probably make acceptable decisions in many cases, depending on the situation. If they're taking into account, if information is readily available and everybody can easily consume it and understand it, ingest it, comprehend it because of technology, and then everybody can also vote on a subject because of technology, they'll probably make the right choice in many of the cases. And if they were trying to argue for a position that didn't seem to be accepted by the tyranny of the majority, you could say, then it would be more easy for them to make a case because they can do so quicker because of technology. So in theory, I think a direct democracy in that sense could actually end up working out for them. And that's kind of what I'm leaning towards for what they are. But I admit I have not decided what the CMBW Askosi are in. Obviously, it's very different in the context of the Xibalba setting because the Ember Seat are a coalition. But Askosi themselves, I think it would be very likely for them to be a direct democracy. Maybe I'll have other thoughts. And if you have thoughts or suggestions, of course, you can always comment them. But there you go, the Shambler. Hope you got your money's worth and hope you're doing all right. The Beaver99 asks, will there be an Askosi Ackmed? More Askosi world-building questions. Well, Myrian was asking me about flamethrowers, and one of the things he suggested was maybe a plasma flamethrower. I'm not 100% sure that I would do anything like that. Plasma is, for my money, something that you'll probably see limited to Protoss. Now, I mean, technically lasers might be plasma, but not really lasers then, I don't know. Like some of the things that I see from the railguns and stuff for Terran, you could border on plasma, in some ways, because it's like super hot, right? But I think looking at it from the standpoint that I have, I would want to say that no, there's not going to be any flame-based attacks coming out of the Askosi, but there will definitely be some Giga Chad behaviors from some of their units. So I guess we'll just have to watch this space. What am I going to do instead of Askosi, Ackmed? What kind of other thing might I add for the Askosi? That's the question. And maybe there will be a factional Askosi, Ackmed. You never know. 3Crow says, having spent some time working on the old co-op maps, do you feel inclined to create more missions or polish up any other specific content? And he goes on to add that he would really like to see VZO2, the second Zerg mission, which was a space platform map that I was starting to refurbish a couple of days ago. And he also wants to see Nemesis Stormborn. Well, that's definitely something that's on the list. I think Nemesis Stormborn will end up being refurbished after the other missions that I've already done. I do think that the other options would basically be to go through the list and see anything else that I might be able to refurbish, like Nemesis Omega or... I never ended up finishing Nemesis Chain, but maybe something like that could be it. I also never finished Nemesis Flight. Some of these other options, right? So there's like a number of things that I could go back and like either finish or polish up, or I could just start making new stuff, right? And I am always looking to make new stuff in the context of campaign missions and stuff. It's a question of, where is my head at as far as like the kind of work that I can do? The biggest problem with all of these co-op missions right now, even after I'm going to be done refurbishing them from a gameplay standpoint, is that we won't have any dialogue, guys. We won't have any voice acting. And that to me is like a big miss. That's something that we would miss, even if the intent is, hey, you can replay this over and over again. So maybe you wouldn't want voice acting for the replayable ones. And if we're transferring these maps instead of downloading them, then, the voice acting bloats the file sizes. And that also affects the repositories as well. So, all of this stuff these are things that I think about, but broadly speaking, I think it would be great to actually have the voice acting in the projects, in these parts, in these kinds of things. So it would be nice to get those done. Something that Veek mentioned is that there should probably be a separate repository for the editor and the maps, such that you wouldn't need to, I guess like ideally it just wouldn't, update the, we wouldn't need to have separate versions of the maps in each, download. So you wouldn't have a pre-release version of a map and a release version of a map. Although you might still want to do that because of the whole like, oh, we've changed the tile sets, so it's different now. I don't know. I'm not really sure about that one, but like, maybe there's a chance that like it makes sense to do stuff like that in the future. So maybe we can improve that. so that it's easier to distribute those. And that's one less thing that's bloating the file size of the repositories. Because at some point we are going to have to change that over again, which is going to involve updating the fraud launcher. So not really a huge loss, but definitely something to think about. And I guess the answer to this question is I am going to create some or continue to refurbish some content. Like Stormborn is definitely on there, but I'm going to wait until I'm done with the other vanilla missions that I've had in some form of completion or another. And then when it comes to the work on the other specific content, I'm not sure about creating anything else, but I want to. It's a question of, I still have to do the tutorial work. So I'm going to script out the Zerg tutorial. I'll be working on that this week. And we'll see about finishing up the Terran tutorial as well with like the trial run voice acting that I do have and just getting that uploaded and getting that available. And if we can do that and get the Zerg one up, maybe before the end of November and maybe the Protoss one before the end of December, then I think that'll be some really solid content. And we'll have checked those boxes as far as finishing off some very good introductory things, as well as some video content as well. Later on this week, I want to work on a very, very surface level, like 1 or 2 minute long video that, it depends. Was thinking about shilling the project to his friends and stuff, but it's hard for him to do that if he is, having to link to like, 20-minute long videos of me casting over a game. It's not really a great introduction. It's just like, maybe that's how you stumble upon it, but it might not be the best way to like immediately see what's up with the project. And so having like a short introductory video that covers the bare basics, the bare minimum, and then also like makes you excited to learn more and invites you to do so, but not in that video necessarily, is definitely a big deal. So maybe that'll end up being like a companion video to a longer one. I'm not 100% sure, but that would definitely be something to look at for this week. So we'll see about that. Anyway, I guess that pretty much wraps up our show because we are going to be talking about the show outro here. This was a shorter episode than the last time around where we had Vic on and we talked for like 2 hours, 15 minutes or whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed. I think I was actually a lot more cogent this time than the last time I took a shot of whiskey, so that's kind of funny. But who knows? Maybe you can post in the comments that I actually wasn't the whole time. And just trying to continue these up once a week as per our coffee-related agreement. Again, I really would appreciate it if you guys do have any spare cash. I know it's a holiday season, so unlikely in some ways, but if you happen to have any spares, you want to send it over for project development and funding, you think the project has given back to you, I always appreciate it. Earlier, while I was recording this, 3Crow sent in some money, so shout out to him again, and I appreciate him doing that. We are absolutely going to continue making this thing as good as it can be, and the more we can do that, the better, and the funding does actually help with that. If we get enough of that, for example, I'll be able to take another day off of work again, go back down to just 3 days a week instead of 4. That's like one of the examples here, and then you're just going to see more from me. And I'm also constantly trying to use this as an excuse to get better about like sleeping on time, working out, keeping my health in good order, so I can always make time to make more content. I always have the energy to continue making more stuff for you guys. So it's not just something that I say because, wouldn't it be nice if I, didn't have to work a physical job for money. It's also, this stuff actually does help, and it's a lot. It's less other things to worry about, less financial stress to follow me around and stuff. If you guys are able to, I definitely appreciate it. And if you're not able to, then there's other ways that you can support, just hanging out, watching the video, commenting, liking, whatever, sharing it with your friends. All that stuff is good. Being a part of the community, all that stuff is good. I always appreciate it. And I'll close it there. GG boys, and see you later.